Well, hey there. It's your old pal Keith from wavetibbles.lol, and we're just messing around with Eventide, Music Mouse by Eventide and Laurie Spiegel. A very interesting, intelligent instrument that dates from, 1986? Music Mouse, as I just said, is an quote-unquote intelligent instrument that turns your mouse and keyboard, meaning your ASCII keyboard, into a chord-performing type of instrument that is not an arpeggiator and not a sequencer, but an instrument unto itself. It's very interesting, and I had never been able to play with Music Mouse before because I didn't have a Macintosh 512 back in the day, which I think was the first machine that it became available for. You see, it does all sorts of interesting things. I've had a hard time creating this video because every time I sit down with Music Mouse, I kind of end up exploring different ideas. But it's great to see this back in a modern form. Music Mouse, like I said, originally debuted in 1986 for the original, 1-bit black and white Macintosh, right, with 512K of RAM. And it was created by electronic musician Laurie Spiegel. What is wrong with my microphone? It feels like it's just not right. And Laurie Spiegel is a very interesting woman. She is not just a composer, but an experimenter and creator of electronic musical instruments, who was at Bell Labs in the 70s. Laurie is still around, and she's partnered with Eventide to create this modern version of Music Mouse that is charmingly retro in a lot of ways. It's got the Chicago-style font here and stuff. And it's just a super interesting experimental instrument that's capable of a lot of different things. I hadn't heard anybody do what I was doing with it in the intro jam, where I have a drum sequence. Whoa, disconnect that. We'll get to how this works. Where I have a little Stylus RMX drum groove going, and trying to play Music Mouse in time with that. Music Mouse is sort of interesting as a piece of software because in its current incarnation, it's a standalone application that, and I'm trying to play as I talk, which is a little hard. It's a standalone application that can send MIDI to your DAW, or it can be used without any sort of MIDI equipment or a digital audio workstation. It runs in 2 modes. Let's maybe put it into sound mode, shall we? So in sound mode, and you see this little pink thing up here? It's showing my key presses. I've got that on today so that you can see what I'm clicking on my typewriter, my computer keyboard, because there's all sorts of interesting key combinations that you can use to change the different modes. Like I can change it from, say, a chord articulation to a arpeggio. And this is not an arpeggio the way you would normally find it in today's or even in vintage instruments. It just means we're like strumming the notes, sort of. Let's see, what else is there? You can do like melodic lines where the different notes are going to be played in sequence on the beat. And then there's an improv mode, which is the only like random thing in Music Mouse. And it like selects what notes it's going to play. It's very interesting. We can change to different like modes. We've got chromatic. It can be very experimental sounding or very pretty sounding. You see how I keep getting lost in what I'm trying to say. It leads you to like very interesting harmonic places that you might not necessarily go on your own. And there's a bunch of different ways it can be used. Like we can even disconnect it from the mouse, and so now my mouse is free to move around, but I can transpose things using the Z and X keys, and I can change the interval of the transposition using Shift Z and X. And so I can transpose this chord in lots of different ways. Or I can hook things back up to the mouse by hitting backspace. And when I hold the button down and let it go, it's going to play the chord. Or I can just mouse around. Super interesting, right? It's really wild, and like I've never been able to play around with this because I didn't have a Mac back in the day. I guess it also ran on the Amiga and the Atari ST, but I was already in PC land by then, and probably at the time those were available, I was already messing around with like hardware samplers and things like that, and it was just on a completely different tip. But extremely charming instrument and very interesting. It can be used by non-musicians to do like interesting musical things. You don't need to have any facility, right, with a MIDI keyboard, with the piano keyboard. Like it literally, it's almost like a first-person shooter, right? It uses a combination of the mouse and keyboard keys to do different things. It's super wild, and I don't even know what to say about this thing except that it's like $29. It's I think on reduced price using code MOUSEY MOUSEY for just $19 at Eventide.com. If I think through the end of April you can use that code. It's totally worth $19. Like $19 is like it's not even a round of drinks. That's like a cocktail and a half. Drink time. It's super fascinating. We'll show. I'll show a few more things that you can maybe do with it. But it's just super cool. I'm going to take a short break and collect my thoughts, and we'll be back. Well, this is the part where I say, like and subscribe for more talky synthesizer content, but I forgot to, because that's just the way this video is going. Oh, this over here? It's nothing. So, you see, I got all distracted, you know? I was going to show how Music Mouse is its own separate application that can run in sound mode or MIDI mode. So let's just shut down all of our stuff. And if we go over to preferences here, you'll see we've got two modes, MIDI and sound. If we change it to sound, it'll play on its own. And it has a bunch of charming little DX7 type sounds that are apparently Laurie Spiegel's own sounds. I'm not sure how these sounds are being generated. Perhaps Eventide implemented something like Dext, which I think Dext is open source, right? Let me just let it play itself for a second here. So it can be used without a DAW or without external MIDI gear and just play its own sounds. Now you'll notice that this sound is quite a bit different from what I was getting out of running it in my DAW, because of course in my DAW I was sending the different MIDI channels for each voice to a different instance of Korg Multipoly, actually. And so in this mode, we just have these DX70 type sounds that we can flip through using the U and I keys. And you'll hear that there are no effects on these sounds. Now, I do kind of think, while this replicates the original functionality of the original Music Mouse, you know, which would just play in sound mode, play little Macintosh sounds. I don't know what type of synthesizer that would be, if there were samples or what. But they were charmingly lo-fi, right? But you could make sounds just with the with no extra equipment, which was kind of cool. And you'll see that we can change the velocity, we can change the pitch modulation, so we're getting like a vibrato now. But I think this is a missed opportunity because, of course, Eventide has tons of shut that off. Has tons of effects, and so I don't know why they didn't build some of their effects into here. You could theoretically like pipe the sound from this application into a standalone effects program like Guitar Rig or something, but I tried that on my PC and I found it quite difficult. But anyway, if you just want to launch Music Mouse, you can make it make sound, or you can, you know, put it into MIDI mode and use it with your DAW. Theoretically, you could use this. Let's see. Where is my DAW? Come back, Bitwig. Theoretically, you could use this with a standalone instrument like Unify 2. However, I was not able to get Unify 2 to send MIDI clock to Music Mouse. Because they didn't document this in the Eventide manual about Music Mouse, I did want to show how to set it up with Bitwig. It's the same way as with other DAWs. They give examples for other DAWs. But basically, in your settings, when you've got Music Mouse running, if you go to your controllers, this is of course Bitwig specific again, you would just add a new generic controller. Here I've already added Music Mouse, and we're just taking the MIDI input from the Music Mouse program. And then to step two, under synchronization, you'll once you have set up MIDI Mouse as a controller, you'll be able to send sync to it. So this button is the sync button, enable MIDI clock, right? And then we can enable MIDI start and stop messages, and always send MIDI clock. And now Bitwig will communicate back to MIDI Mouse and drive its tempo. Okay. So rather than doing like a full tutorial about Music Mouse, because there are great materials already from Eventide that kind of introduce the concept and walk you through all of the different like key combinations and then the basic use of Music Mouse. I wanted to take a minute to note that there's, in addition to the tutorial stuff that Eventide has produced. And by the way, there will be links in the description. There's always links in the description. Um, Eventide has also produced some really interesting documentary content about Laurie Spiegel. And let's just, where are those? I think I have them up in my browser. There's some really great stuff. So this is their tutorial video getting started with Music Mouse. Again, links in the description. There's this great archival footage of Laurie Spiegel on this like late night show demonstrating Music Mouse. It's fascinating stuff. And then there's a nice little documentary that tells you more about Laurie and all of the interesting things she's done. Also, I will have links in the description to Laurie Spiegel's Bandcamp page, where you can find her ambient works, which were for a long time like not available. But they're all available for streaming on Bandcamp. And this album, Unseen Worlds, actually the first 9 tracks on it are actually Music Mouse improvisations. I mean, so if you want to get some ideas of like what you could do with this thing, well, you can just check this out. Really interesting sounding music that's generally in an ambient direction. Also, Expanding Universe has some very interesting, like early electronic stuff, including where's drums? This track called Drums. That's like an early drum synthesis. Like, I mean, it's a complete track, but it's all rhythmic, and it's like synthetic drums and it's super interesting to me. It's well worth going to listen to. You can hear that like really wild stereo stuff that's going on, and they're like very, very convincing percussion sounds, for early electronic music. It's pretty wild. I like it. Go listen to it. What else did I want to say about it? Uh he's there. I could talk about Laurie Spiegel, I think, for a long time. I'm gonna try to get her on our coffee stock playlist. Like I would love to talk with her because one of the interesting things in I think it's here in this little mini documentary that Eventide has produced. Like she talks about electronic music and computer music as folk music, which I think is really super interesting. And it's a thing I've said on the channel before. I had never like seen her talk about this, but I have said that like sound design and synthesizer programming and a lot of electronic music production is a folk art in that in that individuals who are practicing in the space invent new techniques and do new creative things. And these are not disciplines that you generally, go to school to learn. You learn them by doing, and you learn them, by talking to and observing other practitioners. And I just think that's a super interesting idea. So anyway, go consume those materials, even if you don't go and buy Music Mouse. But I think, especially at $19 with the discount code, it's super worth it. A couple other things to note about the setup that I'm using here that I think are worth talking about. Um, One thing that's important to note is Music Mouse. Well, let's get it fired up again. We'll turn the volume down on the Music Mouse parts here. One thing to note is that when you're in MIDI mode, each of the notes, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, they can all be sent to different MIDI channels. So right now, I've got voices 1, 2, and 3 going to MIDI channel 3, and voice 4 going to MIDI channel 2. So you can hear that there's a completely different sound. It's one of my, kind of, what do I call these? The fractional bell types of sounds, right? Using the polygonal waveforms. And so what I've done here in Bitwig is I have a single, let's close that out. So I have a single instance of Unify 2, and Unify 2 is just a really great environment that sort of gives you like a rack um, of plugins. It's like a plugin playground. And so I've got it configured. Let's see here. Let's expand all these. I've got it configured so they've got 3 different instances of Korg Multipoly Native. So one is on channel 1, one is on MIDI channel 2, and then one is on MIDI channel 3. And these all have different patches in them. And so we can get quite different sounds out of Music Mouse just by assigning the voices to different channels in different ways. And the nice thing about Unify is that then it just gives you like a single track here. There's a single track in Bitwig that's consuming all of the MIDI information that's coming from Music Mouse. And it makes it easy to, in addition to being able to just turn off voices 1, 2, 3, and 4, like by hitting Shift 1, Shift 2, Shift 3, Shift 4, we can turn them on and off. And we can also do things like, oh, don't go wacky on me, Music Mouse. Oh boy, I guess Music Mouse didn't like that. It wouldn't be a Keith demo without like something closing unexpectedly. There we go. We're back. So one really interesting thing. Oh, also backspace is really important. Like if you want to disconnect the mouse from the play grid here, if you just hit backspace, that will disconnect the mouse, and now I'm free to move it around. And so I can manually turn voices on and off, or I can use key presses, right? So I can do Shift 2 and I can turn voice 2 back on. I'll hit Shift 4 and turn voice 4 off. There we go. There's a little delay here because I'm using a Bluetooth ASCII keyboard, and I feel like sometimes something is eating my key presses, but this is not a general problem with Music Mouse. Anyway, we can hit the Tab key to like reverse the voices. So now I've got 3 and 4 active, and 1 and 2 are silent, or I can tab back and get to voices 1 and 2, and then I can hit Escape and I can hit all the voices going at the same time. So this is kind of similar to the way that you can do the transposition, right? Let's transpose this up now by 6 semitones. And then back down to our root. Kind of interesting stuff. In the same way, there are 3 different articulations. So you've got staccato, which is just a short MIDI note. We can hit slash to, come on, get into focus. We can hit slash, oh boy, we can hit slash to cycle through our different articulations. Half legato is like a quarter note, and then legato is actually sustain. So the note will sustain until another one plays. And this is very noticeable when you select a different treatment. So like instead of line, now I could select the treatment here, number 1, by pressing Control 1, and that's going to give me chord mode. All the notes are firing at the same time. Okay, so knowing those things, let's go back to line mode. So this creates a little melody for us. And let's go to staccato. You know, one of the cool things about having this feeding into Unify too is that here I could also like just solo one voice or mute unavailable voices. Do I have like one muted? What is going on? Oh, we're only going to the 3 MIDI channels. Well, let's demo that the right way. So let's send voice 1 to channel 1, voice 2 to channel 2. And I muted these. There we go. And we'll send voice 3 to channel 3. And then I don't have a 4th channel, so we'll just send this one to channel 3 as well. But then when they're all playing, right, I could just mute the audio here, or I could solo the audio here. And if you like sounds like these are actually all patches from my Multi-Poly Native patch collection, which you can get at www.wavetables.lol. It's called KRC Collection 1, and it's like 90 patches for Korg Multi-Poly across all sorts of different sounds, including the one that's playing here on channel 3, which is, open up for me. I kind of like that. Which is my Wavetable Piano 1. This is kind of like a CP70 kind of sound. We could maybe change this to a different one. Let's go to the... Anyway, lots of different things you can do there. And another nice thing about Unify is kind of this rack concept, right? So I can do something like put Omnisphere effects on the output bus. I could get things going very ambient by putting a really deep, like, shimmer reverb on here, right? So that's like a really interesting way, I think, to use Music Mouse. Okay. Whoa, just stop it already. Well, that's it for today's video, because I don't know, this one has been cursed. Hopefully the next one will be better. Talk to you later.